Greetings to all our viewers tuning into our channel. No one, not even the most seasoned defense strategists, could have imagined that one day, Canada, a nation long known for its stability, composure, and cautious approach to military decisions, would become the epicenter of a geopolitical earthquake, not because of a war nor a diplomatic crisis, but because of a proposal from a tiny country in Northern Europe. Anyone who's followed Canada's defense policy thought everything was already settled. The future of the Royal Canadian Air Force seemed set in stone. The F-35 was the only choice, the inevitable choice, the no alternative choice. Washington believed it, NATO believed it, and for the most part, so did Ottawa. For decades, Canada had operated within a familiar orbit: buy American weapons, integrate into American systems, and run strategies aligned with American expectations. But then, in a closed-door meeting that came without warning, a Swedish delegation quietly appeared in Ottawa with a dossier, one that a Canadian official would later describe in just a few words. It brought the whole room to a standstill. They weren't pitching a plane, they were proposing a future, a model of cooperation with no precedent, one where Canada would no longer be a customer, but a partner, a co-creator, someone who owns a part of the soul of the next generation fighter jet. In that moment, the argument shifted. The question was no longer, which is stronger, the Gripen or the F-35, but rather, what role does Canada want to play in the order of the 21st century? The shift was so unexpected that both Washington and Brussels were caught off guard. A more independent Canada meant a NATO that was less predictable. And for the first time in decades, Ottawa found itself holding two completely different paths, one that continued down the road of dependence, and one that opened up to autonomy. And so, to understand why the Gripen Shock was so seismic, we have to look back at something that had long been taken for granted: why the F-35 was once seen as the only choice, the irreplaceable choice, for Canada. For nearly 2 decades, Canada had been locked into a strategic orbit that no one dared question. To many, choosing the F-35 felt like an unwritten clause embedded in the structure of North American defense. Canada is one half of NORAD, the world's only fully binational aerospace defense command operated in tandem with the United States. That meant every platform, every system, every tech package had to be perfectly compatible with Washington. The F-35, therefore, became the default choice, not because it was the cheapest, not because it was the best fit, but because it was the only key that could unlock deep cooperation with the U.S. That pressure didn't just come from politics or military doctrine, it came from the industrial ecosystem too. Hundreds of Canadian companies depend on the F-35 supply chain. For years, Ottawa was repeatedly warned: if Canada withdrew from the program, contracts would vanish, jobs would disappear, and its influence within NATO would shrink. No one wanted to be the one blamed for damaging the alliance. And so the F-35 kept moving forward, like a train on tracks that no longer allowed for a turn. But behind that sense of inevitability were contradictions that everyone saw, yet no one dared to speak aloud. The F-35 was too expensive to maintain the volume of Arctic patrols Canada needed. Its core technology was so tightly controlled that Canada couldn't even modify the software of its own fleet. Every single update required American approval, item by item. Every combat operation funneled mission data through foreign servers. A vast country like Canada, whose skies stretch many times wider than Europe's, was being limited by an operational model it didn't control. And yet, with no alternatives on the table, every debate ended there. Everyone knew there was a problem, but no one believed it could be changed. The F-35 had become a sealed wall, one that seemed impossible to break through, until the day Sweden arrived with a proposal unlike anything that had come before. A quiet but powerful move that, for the first time, forced Ottawa to stop and ask, do we really have no other choice? And that question became the starting point of what would later be known as the Gripen E shock. There was no grand press conference, no flags waving in front of the media, not even the usual diplomatic statements about enhancing bilateral cooperation. Everything happened quietly, almost in secrecy. A group of Swedish engineers, military experts, and defense industry representatives quietly landed in Ottawa, carrying with them a dossier that instantly upended Canada's entire framework for thinking about the future of its Air Force. Inside that closed-door meeting, they didn't talk about transactions. They didn't list prices. They didn't highlight the aircraft's strengths like you'd expect from a sales pitch. Instead, they presented something else entirely, a strategic partnership model, where Canada wouldn't just own the planes, it would own the knowledge, the technology, and the autonomy, things that for years had been assumed to be the exclusive domain of global superpowers. Sweden's proposal included offers that no NATO country had ever received: the right to assemble Gripen E aircraft on Canadian soil, deep access to core technologies, including sensitive electronic modules, the freedom to modify combat software without U.S. approval, a domestic supply chain lasting decades, creating thousands of high-skilled jobs, full control over mission data, the lifeblood of modern warfare. That last point alone was enough to leave many Canadian officials stunned. With the Gripen E, Ottawa could write its own radar algorithms, optimize its own electronic warfare tactics, and configure its combat systems without needing anyone's permission. As one Canadian general whispered to a colleague after leaving the meeting, open quote, "They didn't come here to sell us a jet. They came to offer us the chance to become a sovereign nation." Close quote. That moment was a turning point, because if Canada claimed true autonomy, it meant the U.S. would lose a critical link in its chain of control over the Arctic. It would lose the ability to shape how Canada managed its airspace, its air force, and its northern defense strategy. And that's why Sweden's proposal wasn't just a commercial offer. It was a strike at the heart of NATO's existing order. From that moment on, the debate over buying the F-35 or the Gripen morphed into a far bigger question. Does Canada want to remain a customer or become a strategic partner in shaping the future? But to understand why the Gripen E proposal struck at Washington's deepest fear, we need to turn to another part of the world, the region that may well define the 21st century, the Arctic, the very place where the Gripen E was born to shine. The Arctic is heating up, not just because of climate change, but because of an unprecedented strategic rivalry between Russia, the US, China, and all of NATO. And right in the center of that map is Canada, a nation that controls the longest Arctic coastline, the widest expanse of northern airspace, yet operates an air combat force constrained by operating costs and technological dependence. In this context, the Gripen E doesn't just emerge as an alternative. It arrives as the answer to Canada's existential question: how do you defend the Arctic without draining your budget or becoming reliant on any one superpower? The Gripen E was built for harsh environments. Sweden designed it to survive, operate, and fight in freezing conditions, where temperatures can drop to -40 degrees Celsius, where runways can ice over without warning. With the Gripen, Canada saw for the first time a fighter jet that could take off from short or improvised runways, operate from dispersed bases in remote areas, be maintained by a small technical crew, be rearmed and ready in under 10 minutes, and fly at a fraction of the operating cost of the F-35. This means that instead of relying on a handful of large bases which are easy targets, Canada could build a decentralized defense network across the Arctic, a flexible, resilient strategy, and one that feels deeply Canadian. More importantly, the Gripen E isn't just a cheap or easy-to-maintain jet. It's a powerful electronic warfare platform, optimized to survive against radar systems and long-range missiles, the kind Russia deploys heavily across the polar region. In modern defense strategy, speed is no longer the only advantage. Stealth, jamming, and the ability to neutralize enemy systems are now the keys to survival. If Canada chooses the F-35 for the Arctic, it faces a painful trade-off. A powerful aircraft, yes, but one so expensive to operate that patrol frequency may have to be reduced. The Gripen E, by contrast, with its low cost and high deployability, gives Ottawa something far more important: persistent presence. And in a vast, contested territory like the Arctic, presence is everything. Yet even all these technical advantages are not what worry Washington the most. The true strategic flashpoint between the Gripen and the Arctic lies in something less visible, something that now defines who controls the skies and who dominates modern warfare: data. And this is where Canada faces a turning point decision: continue allowing the US full control over its mission data, or seize, for the first time in decades, the opportunity for true autonomy. In modern warfare, weapons are just the body. What determines victory or defeat is the soul. Mission data, radar algorithms, combat software, electronic warfare programs, maps of enemy signals. These invisible elements form the true intelligence of a fighter jet. And for decades, Canada has never had full control over that soul. No matter how powerful, the F-35 remains a closed ecosystem. Every software update requires permission. Every change in combat configuration must be approved. Even the mission data, the most valuable asset of all, must first be transmitted to US servers before Canada is allowed to use it. It's like having a skilled pilot who still needs to ask for the keys every time they want to start their own aircraft. A vast nation like Canada, standing on the front lines of the Arctic, cannot accept such dependence forever. And this is precisely what makes the Gripen E such a revolutionary breakthrough. Sweden isn't just selling a fighter jet, they're offering control. With the Gripen, Canada can rewrite algorithms, reconfigure radar systems, design its own electronic warfare tactics, update software independently, and store and protect its mission data without any external interference. A model that has no precedent in NATO, and one that the United States would never agree to offer. This difference isn't just military, it's about sovereignty, because the nation that controls the data controls its skies. But the story doesn't end there. Once Canada holds the keys to its own software and data, it unlocks something far greater. A door that leads back to a military aerospace industry it lost long ago after the fall of the Avro Arrow. A chance to revive national capability, create jobs, reclaim technological ownership, and join the ranks of nations that don't just operate fighter jets, they build them. And it's here that a strategic debate begins to shift into an economic vision. Because the Gripen E proposal carries with it a future Canada has been waiting over half a century to reclaim. The second Arrow moment is drawing near. More than half a century ago, Canada stood on the brink of an aviation revolution. The Avro Arrow, the pride of the nation, a symbol of Canadian engineering brilliance, was abruptly cancelled amidst political tensions and Allied pressure. The dream of becoming an aerospace industrial power was shattered in a single afternoon. To this day, generations of engineers still recall that story as a wound that never fully healed. And now, in a twist no one expected, it is Sweden, a small but resolute nation, that has reopened a door Canada thought was sealed forever. The Gripen E cooperation proposal isn't just a sales contract. It's an invitation for Canada to step back onto the stage it exited in the 1960s. If Ottawa agrees, a series of unprecedented milestones could become reality. Thousands of Canadian engineers trained in Europe's most advanced military aviation program, maintenance, assembly, and upgrade centers established in Quebec and Ontario, Canada becoming a key link in the global Gripen E supply chain. Universities, research institutes, and tech startups directly connected to the defense innovation ecosystem. Rights to co-produce and co-export, something never allowed under the F-35 program. More than just jobs and revenue, the Gripen E model offers something deeper. The restoration of a core national capability that Canada once lost. The ability to develop and optimize technology independently. When a country controls the software, the data, the production lines, and the supply chain, it is no longer a customer inside someone else's system. It becomes a creator. Many experts have called this Canada's second Arrow moment, a transformation with the potential to last for decades, shifting the country from a technology importer to a technology exporter, a rare reversal in the world of defense industry. And that precisely is what makes Washington uneasy. Because if Canada rebuilds its aerospace sector on a large scale, this time powered by Swedish, not American technology, it could significantly reduce U.S. industrial and military influence in both the Arctic and within NATO. At this point, the story of economic opportunity begins to evolve into something much larger, a geopolitical reckoning. How can a single Canadian decision reshape the balance of power inside NATO itself? Within NATO's power structure, Canada has never been a fringe member. On the contrary, Ottawa holds a role so unique that no other nation can replace it. Canada controls half of the Arctic airspace, is a critical node in NORAD, serves as North America's frontline early warning shield, and acts as a geostrategic bridge between Washington and Europe. Any shift in Canada's air power capabilities sends ripples across the entire architecture of Western defense. That's why, when Sweden proposed a partnership model independent of the US, Washington's concern wasn't just about a lost contract. It was about a shift in the center of gravity. Most NATO countries build their air strategy around American technology. This allows Washington to coordinate allied air combat operations, control access to mission data, oversee software upgrades and weapons configurations, maintain a global F-35 supply chain worth hundreds of billions of dollars. If Canada, one of the three core members of North America's air defense system, chooses to break away from that orbit, it sets a precedent the US considers dangerous. Because if a major, resource-rich, strategically located country like Canada dares to pursue autonomy, others within NATO may start asking, why can't we do the same? Washington's anxiety isn't about the Gripen E itself. It's about the possibility of a fragmented NATO, one where each country could run its own software, data systems, and supply chains outside US control. That fragmentation doesn't just erode political influence. It undercuts the industrial military dominance the US has built over decades. So Canada's decision isn't just about switching fighter jets. It's a reminder that the old order, where the US held unquestioned supremacy over NATO's air defense structure, might be starting to crack. And when a peaceful power like Canada begins to rethink its place in the alliance system, the whole world takes notice. There are moments in a nation's history that arrive without noise. No fireworks, no stirring speeches, yet carry the weight of an entire century. Canada now stands at just such a moment. The choice between the F-35 and the Gripen E may seem like a matter of weapons procurement, but in truth, it touches a much deeper question. What kind of nation does Canada want to be in this new era? If it continues down the familiar path, Canada will remain firmly embedded in the US-led defense network, preserving stability, yes, but also accepting limitations on its autonomy. The F-35 is powerful, cutting edge, but it comes with strings, dependence on US technology, supply chains, and control over mission data. It's a safe choice, but safe doesn't always mean right for the future. On the other hand, stepping onto a new path brings risks and greater responsibility, but also opens a door that has never existed before. Control over software, control over data, control over production, and the chance to revive an aerospace industry that once made Canada a global leader. The Gripen E is more than just a jet. It's an invitation for Canada to become a truly sovereign nation, not just in defense, but in strategic thinking. No one can say for sure which way Ottawa will decide, but one thing is already clear. Sweden has put a choice on the table strong enough to shake a system once thought unshakable. And for the first time in decades, Canada holds in its hands the opportunity to redefine its role in NATO, in the Arctic, and in the global balance of power. This isn't just a debate about fighter jets. It's a debate about identity, about the future, and about the strategic coming of age of a nation. If you have your own perspective on Canada's choice, drop a comment below. Which path do you think Canada should take, and why? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more of our deep, thought-provoking geopolitical analysis like this one.